Good afternoon. We welcome you to the Rossmore Interfaith Council's Big Questions program, How is Peace Possible in Today's World? With Rabbi Mayer Perelmuter and Bettina Gray, this month's participants. We always have a land acknowledgement, and as we recognize the lands on which we work, serve, and play, we remember the first inhabitants of these lands, especially the Bay Miwok, Ohlone, and Tachiyokuts people, with each group having their own relationship with the highest peak that the colonizers called Mount D. We must also acknowledge that this country was built on the free enslaved labor of Black people, and that labor was violently enforced for hundreds of years. Let's honor the legacy of the African diaspora and Black life, knowledge, and skills stolen due to white supremacy. As Californians, we must also remember our history of welcoming Chinese labor when we wanted low-wage workers to build the railroad, but our state and federal government turned our back on them with the Chinese Exclusion Act when the railroads were completed. And we must also keep in our memory that just a few generations ago, we subjected all Japanese Americans to internment during World War II, allowing others to steal all of their belongings in most places. We remember this history so that we will participate in creating a new history that we can all be a part of, where all belong. We welcome Sarah Blackstock to our event today as well, and Sarah will introduce our speakers.
Take it away, Sarah. Thank you. So welcome to you adventurers and explorers of life's big questions. We're indeed still sailing on rough waters, as is obvious to everybody. And as we attempt to explore our big question for 2022, which is, how can there be peace in today's world? Thank you to Susie Cole, president of the Rossmore Interfaith Council, to the Big Questions Committee, Ruth Ahern, Channing Miller, and Sunshine, Gloria Sunshine. We really appreciate Will McGarvey, who has shepherded us through our Big Questions Zoom through the pandemic, and hopefully is here to stay for a while. Thanks also to Channel 28, who is recording this session, and we'll be putting it on Channel 28 Rossmore TV. So my question is, why are some of us always asking questions? Think of a child. They're just one big question mark. Where do zebras come from? Why do they have stripes? What's under my skin? Where does the sun go at night? They ask questions because they are trying to learn about their world. They're curious, and they are using the answers to formulate a worldview and their part in it. It seems like that's just part of being a human. So why are we as adults asking questions? One answer might be, we are trying to integrate an external worldview with our internal worldview and how we fit into this process. As thinking adults, we are trying to make sense of life and death, pain, suffering, war, love. We're looking for meaning and attempting to define values to live by. We're seeking to coordinate our experience with the knowledge of the world. It is often uncomfortable and disturbing asking such questions because we fear the answer, or we think that there is no answer. Animals don't ask questions. They just want to have a full stomach, be warm and comfortable and free from fear. Perhaps for some people, this is answer enough, and they see no need to ask questions. So today, let's hear from our two speakers about our big question, how can there be peace in today's world? Indeed, that is a very difficult question because there are no obvious answers. Our first speaker is Rabbi Mayer Perelmuter. He is a graduate of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. During over 40 years in the active congregational rabbinate, he served in a variety of denominational settings. In Chicago, in a conservative congregation, in an Israel congregation, as the country recovered from the trauma of the Yom Kippur War, 36 years in the Reformed Temple of Forest Hills, New York. 8 years ago, he was appointed Rabbi Emeritus. For 10 years, he served as an adjunct associate professor of theology at St. John's University in New York City. He asked me to shorten his biography, but I don't want to leave out the following ways he served: as a Red Cross disaster worker, a spiritual care chaplain during 9/11, and at the Hurricane Sandy disaster. Rabbi moved to Rossmore with his wife, Deborah. They have 3 children and 5 grandchildren. We welcome you, Rabbi Perelmuter. Rabbi, you're muted. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. Am I unmuted? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Am I good here? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first of all,
if you can just center the camera on your face, so those of us that read lips can also read your lips.
Is that good? Okay, great. Well, first of all, I want to thank the committee for inviting me to speak, and what the work that you're doing seems really very, very interesting, and very interesting to me. And I appreciate all of the the work, the hard work that all the dedicated workers do. And Will McGarvey, who I met many years ago when we first were trying out Rossmore. I'm in awe of the kind of work that he does, and I'm just met Bettina. I'm looking forward to hearing her presentation and the work that she's doing. Thank you for the introduction. I don't really recognize the person who you're introducing, but I really appreciate your words very much. And when you started out by talking about questions, I said, oh boy, she sounds like she's a Jew, because Judaism is all about questions. That's it. It's about questions, big questions, little questions, detailed questions, questions that are impossible to answer, some questions that you can't answer. So I want to begin this reflection on how is peace possible in today's world. Obviously, I'm going to give a Jewish voice with a finger demonstration. In the year 1946, what did this mean? It meant victory in World War II, but that war killed over 80 million people. And did that victory bring world peace? In the 1960s, what did this mean? Of course, we all know it meant an end to the war in Vietnam, or end the war in Vietnam. It was the slogan of a movement that influenced the ending of a futile involvement of our military in a disastrous war. Did the peace movement of the 1960s lead to peace? Did it lead to peace in this world? Now let's go to the year 100 AD. What do you think this meant? Well, you're sitting in the Roman Colosseum, you're a working stiff, and you're watching the chaos and the butchery in the Roman Colosseum, and you hold up 4 fingers. Well, back then in 100 AD, it meant 4 hot dogs. Don't these hand signs point to the absurdity of a world filled with violence that constantly declines to embrace peace? Given what we learn about the past and experience in the present, how do I respond to today's big question representing a Jewish voice? And I say that it all depends on us. It depends on you, and it depends on me. there's a modern a Jewish midrash. It's an adaptation of an older midrash, and midrash is basically a story or an elaboration of an ancient text, of an ancient biblical text. It's a commentary on how God created the world. And it says that before there was anything, there was God. And God created the heavens and the waters and the stars and all kinds of soil and plants and animals and creeping things and crawling things. And so the angels asked God, is the world finished now? And God answered, it's not. So God then made a man and a woman. And he said to them, I've been working hard for six days, and I'm really tired, man and woman. Why don't you go finish the job? But we can't do that, they said. You're God. So God answered, he said, let's make a deal. Let's be partners. Let's work together. So they all signed a covenant, an agreement, a brit, and they agreed to do this partnership, to do this deal together, and together finish the world. And then the angels asked God, is the world finished yet? And God answered, go ask my partners. Now, Jews respond to this concept of partnership by embracing another concept called a Torah. Now, Torah is much more than the 5 books of Moses, the first 5 books of the Bible. The Torah is not just about law, as many people think it is. It is deeply grounded in love. And it teaches that love blossoms by teaching and learning from one another. Now, the concept of Torah is really a path. It comes from the Hebrew root yara. Learning Torah can give us a road, a major road, a way to journey through this existence. The road, the path that I'm talking about in Judaism has many different lanes, because there are many ways to embrace Judaism, not just one way. There are many ways to do Jewish. 98% of them are totally, in my opinion, reasonable. Some of them are not reasonable. In that spirit, I want to share a few headlines or lanes, I guess, or headlines that most Jews would likely not dispute. Headline number 1. Judaism laserly focuses on coping with the realities of living in this world. 2,000 years ago, there was a Jewish political entity which lasted for over 1,000 years. And just recently, that national entity was reborn in the state of Israel. So therefore, when a people possesses a nation, war and violence, as the world is structured today, are realities. More than 2,000 years ago, the Torah tried to legislate laws connected with war's reality. These laws do not say, when you are attacked, turn the other cheek. They say, we are obligated to defend ourselves. However, war and the use of violence are severely restricted. For example, there's something called, in rabbinic tradition, an optional war, a milchemet reshut, which is a war to take something away from the other, to expand territory, to expand your economy. Now, Jewish law makes that kind of aggressive war absolutely impossible to fight because there's so many restrictions preventing such a war. A Jewish state following the path of Torah could never do what the Russians are doing the Ukraine. The only violence that Judaism sanctions is for self-defense. And when your homeland's existence is existentially threatened. Again, I reference the heroic behavior of Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian people. The Ukrainians are now fighting what I would call a milchemet mitzvah, what the tradition calls a milchemet mitzvah, a war of total self-defense. And in a war of self-defense, our sacred texts teach that everyone who can fight must take up arms if they are able to. The actions permitted in a defensive war are also enumerated, as well as the strict limitations imposed in an optional war. Now, many of these traditions, grounded in Jewish law, are found today in today's modern concept of just war theory, elaborated by Michael Walzer in things like the Geneva Convention, the anti-genocide treaties, and attempts to put limits and bring to justice people like Putin. Headline number 2. I believe that peace is aspirational. It's a hope. I say this as being part of the Jewish people. How does a people like the Jewish people possibly, on our own, as an entity, go to war if no independent homeland exists for over 2,000 years? And the only thing you can do is defend yourself from anti-Semitic attack, whether it be during the early Roman times, whether it be in Poland or in the Ukraine during the Russian Revolution when the whites were fighting the Reds and the Cossacks murdered hundreds of thousands of Jews, more than maybe the Nazis did in the Ukraine, or during the Crusades. And you lack the resources to fight because you don't have a state. There's not a state behind you, and you're overwhelmed by such a superior force. So what did we do? Here's what we did. We took these laws about war and the references and stories about war in the Bible, and this gave us great hope in exile. We sat down, we faced the harsh reality of the exile, and our rabbis took these concepts and they spiritualized them. So the real waging of war was transformed into the struggle to achieve peace from without, in that very dangerous external world that we lived in and that we still live in, and from within, most importantly, within the self. Because to effectuate change, you have to change yourself. So a couple of brief examples. In Jewish liturgy, in our prayer service, we end every prayer session with the prayer. It's called Shalom Rav. It means, may there be a great peace, may there be a universal peace. 3 times a day, on the Sabbath, whenever we pray, and any service that we do, we end on the theme of peace. In the mourner's prayer, the Kaddish prayer, which is said after somebody dies, sometimes it's said for a month, sometimes for a year, we conclude by saying, as God creates peace in the heavens, God will make peace for us here on earth. The illusion being that the turmoil of mourning, which is chaotic, will eventually evolve into embracing the loss by creating an internal memory of the departed. And this leads the mourner to re-engage in life, actually experiencing possibly a sense of quietude and peace out of loss's chaos. And then there's the legend that before the Torah was revealed to Moses and Israel on Mount Sinai, for just one moment, all the 12 tribes of Israel were not quarreling, disagreeing, or in conflict with one another. All 600,000 Hebrews stood at the foot of Mount Sinai in oneness. completeness. And after they got the Torah, they went out into the wilderness and they started quarreling again. And that continued on into when they entered the promised land. Now, I could present many more examples, but in headline number 3, which really is the message that I want to emphasize today, is to explore what does the Hebrew word peace, shalom, really mean? What does shalom mean linguistically? What does it mean literally? Because language conveys so much. Hebrew is a triconsonantal language. It's based on roots. So shalom comes from the Hebrew root shin, lamed, mem, which can create some of the following words, which you're probably familiar with. You may be familiar with. Shalom, Shalem, Yerushalayim, Shleimut. The basic meaning of peace then, in all these terms, is wholeness, oneness, completeness, equilibrium. A Friday night, we just sat at the Seder table, the tradition of the Passover meal and observance, and we ended our ritual by saying, Bashana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. And we end the whole Seder experience with the word Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. Now, to many Jews, this does not mean, at least American Jews, that we want to go back and live in Israel and live in Jerusalem. I lived in Jerusalem for a number of years. I worked there. I'm very happy here in Rossmore, but I love visiting Jerusalem and Israel. I've got family there. But Jerusalem Yerushalayim is not only really a city. Yerushalayim is a concept. And it means, in a way, next, it means Yeru means he will teach, Shalem, peace. May peace come down, may peace be brought down to us. Next year will the world, we end our Seder, next year will the world, my society, my inner self be guided towards peace and oneness and wholeness. Now, these words at the Seder's end express the Jewish and human learning to find wholeness and healing out of the experience of exile and brokenness and slavery that Mitzrayim, or Egypt, represents, from the brokenness of this world and the fractures that may exist in our communities and within our families and within ourselves. So in conclusion, we ask the question again, is peace possible in this world today? And given the situation of the society and the individual and the way things are structured, I personally do not think so. But I will never stop praying and hoping for peace and keep working to make this happen. So the question is, how do I do this? Well, I imagine myself in a dirty kitchen, facing a huge sink, and I'm all alone in this kitchen. And there, hopefully others will join me. And it's filled with thousands, tens of thousands of dirty, grimy, soiled dishes in this huge sink. And I say to myself, I'm going to try to wash just one dish at a time and do it in God's name, which means to me, taking my partnership with God as a serious task. For example, I can practice acts of kindness in my life. For when I am kind, I feel that I am in God's presence. You know, I had a really dear, dear friend who just passed away. He was a rabbi, a study partner. He was also a mystic. And he said, Mayer, if you want to experience God, just be kind. I'm also motivated by the biblical commandment, which means love the stranger, love the other as thyself, because you know the heart of the other. Because we were strangers, we were the other, we were the oppressed slave in the land of Egypt. Now, this commandment to love the stranger, believe it or not, is the most frequently repeated commandment in the entire Torah. And finally, I am guided in this quest by a student who asked her teacher, how can this broken world be put back together again? It's so fragmented, it is so fractured. And so her teacher pulled out one of these 1,000-piece puzzles and said, put it together. Laboring very hard, she managed to put this together. It took her half a day. And when she succeeded, it turned out to be the picture of a complete person. Now, said the teacher, take this puzzle, laminate it, crazy glue it, and turn it over. And when she did so, lo and behold, the other side turned out to be a united, completed, and perfected map of the world. And he said to her, it's obvious, when you put the person together, the world will turn out all right. So if we really want peace in today's world, let's start out by being kind to each other, to ourselves, to partnering with God to complete this world. I started the reflection with hand signs. Allow me to share with you another one. It is found in the book of Numbers, I think, or Deuteronomy. And it is the blessing that the high priest gave to Israel in the temple. They would bless the people. At the end of a service, many rabbis hold up their hands like this, as the priests did, and they would say, Yivarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, may God bless us and keep us. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chunecha, may God cause God's face to shine upon us, bring us light, and be gracious unto us, give us grace. Yisa Adonai panav eleinu v'yasem lanu shalom, may God lift up his countenance unto us and grant us peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. That's a beautiful, inspirational uplift to your sharing.
Thank you.
To end with that prayer to God. It's I really appreciate the way that you suggested that we begin with an awareness to each other and to partnering with God, and that peace begins with each of us. So this now is the time for you folks to make comments and to ask Rabbi Perelmuter questions. He said a couple of things that might have stirred some thoughts. So we've got, some time for this. So take a deep breath and engage your thinking mind. And if you'll raise your hand, then one of our committee will call on you. Ruth, you're really good at seeing hands. You want to do that? Rabbi would prefer that the committee handle the questions, or at least call the names. So you can also go to reactions. Click on reactions down there at the bottom, And a little hand will go up if you want to raise your hand to say something.
That also puts them up to the top of the gallery view, so it's easier for us to call on you.
That's right. You know, it took me a year to discover that, Will. That little hand up there. So there's, I can just feel your brains and hearts working. Ask a question. I've got a question, of course, but this isn't about me.
Yep.
So, Mayor, did you say something?
No, I just said, or a comment.
Or comment, sure, yes. This is open season. This is any comments you want to make about peace, your experiences with peace, your ideas of peace. Well, seeing as how nobody's speaking up, let me ask.
Channing is.
Oh, Channing, thank you. Okay, good. I didn't see
Unmute
it.
yourself, please.
Sorry, I forgot to do the hand going up. So, Rabbi, hello. It's good to see you again.
Hi, Channing.
Hi. Yeah, I was just wondering, you've had a lot of work in many regions of the world, really working for peace with your feet on the ground and working very hard. And I'm just wondering, is there anything that you can tell us from that experience of working with Jews and Arabs and other peacekeeping efforts that you've had? Is there anything that comes from that work that would be helpful in this time of agony and war?
Well, during the time I lived in Israel, and I lived in Israel for 3 years, got there right after the Yom Kippur War. And I was in a congregation, it's called Emet Vi'Anava, and there were like, I was first a social worker, then got into this congregation. And there were small congregation, Reform Jews. There were only about 90 families. Out of those 90 families, they lost 6 of their kids. And I spent the time there. I was only in Israel for 3 years. I spent a lot of the time in the congregation for a year and a half. Their rabbi had left. He was traumatized. He was a tank commander. And I spent a lot of my time working with those families in being there for them as they journey through this awful loss. Okay. So I've not directly been involved in working to bring Arabs and Jews together, to the extent that when I'm in Israel, I treat Palestinians and Arabs with extreme dignity and very curious about, what they believe and what their experiences are. And I've had some wonderful conversations, and it's been one-on-one. Israel's a very complex issue, and there's a huge variety of stuff. But in our family, we have a very dear cousin, for example, whose husband, who herself was in the military and now works to bring Palestinian kids to the beach on a summer camp, and works very, very hard towards peace. One of my dear, dear friends founded and I supported him when he first got to Israel, founded a organization called Interns for Peace, where they brought people into Israeli villages and Palestinian villages and brought them together, working projects. So I think, the road to peace is to get people together, to get them talking together, and to get them working together. And, that's I think the thing that works the best. And also when they experience loss. I mean, you have a lot of, there's a group in Israel of people who, who've lost, Israelis who've lost their children to terrorism, to terrorists. And Palestinian families who've lost children, and these families, meet together and grieve together, and there's a commonality. So once you depoliticize this and get away right wing, left wing, whatever wing, and start seeing people as people, that works. Another example would be my work in 9/11. The most important thing that I learned there was, we worked in an ecumenical ministry. There were imams, there were all kinds of people. There were Buddhist monks, there were Greek Orthodox priests, there were Catholic priests, there were ministers, there were people who were spiritual, whatever, didn't have a title. And we all worked together. It really didn't matter, exactly what our religious preference was. We didn't impose that. We did what's called spiritual care. You're just there. You're just present to the person. You're just there for the person. And that's what's really, I think, the way to do this is to be there and to be open and to see the person not as the other, not to see the other as the other, but to see the person, as the person. So, those are just some, kind of headlines of some of the experiences that I've had. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Very rich experiences. So it's in about 5 minutes, I'd like to introduce Bettina, but my question, Rabbi, is when is it okay to wage war? And I know that you can't do that in 5 minutes, but
no, I think I put everybody to sleep.
Oh, no, that's it's a very poignant question.
So when is it okay to wage war, in my opinion?
Yeah, yes. When is it okay to wage war?
Yeah, well, when my existential existence is at risk. So say I'm living in California, okay? And California is a country. And I've got my home and I'm sitting here with my wife and my kids are here. And Nevada and Oregon have teamed up together, and they've militarized, and they like the California drought and vineyards and all this wonderful stuff in California, the weather, the .com stuff that we have in California, and they want to, and they want to destroy California, and they want to say, California doesn't have a right to exist. You just don't have a right to exist, and we're going to attack you. We're going to throw missiles at you, or we're going to, get into our tanks, and we're going to come after you, and we're going to destroy you as an entity, and everyone there. That would endanger my home and my family. And yes, in that instance, I would go to war. I would. In fact, my tradition says that we are commanded to do so. If you are attacked and your existence, if it's an existential situation, then there's a command to do so. But there are even limits, on that once you win, you don't start butchering the other people, and you sue for peace, and you're very, you just don't go and take vengeance, but you defend yourself. So that in this real world, see, Torah, Torah is really about, Judaism is very much a religion of dealing with the realities of this world. How do you cope with this crazy world that we live in? And still inject principles of morality and ethics.
That's a good, big question.
Yeah.
We ought to write that down, committee, for in the future. Thank you, Rabbi Perelmuter.
You're welcome.
And very much. You've given
you have another question from Ruth.
Oh, I saw. You know, I don't see the hands. Who's got their hand up? Oh, there's
the
Ruth in the corner, of course.
No, I have a hand up. I'm just wondering if the rabbi can comment on when international unity will help, how to get to the point where there's international unity so that the nations of the world aren't one-on-one, but there's some sort of amity that generally reigns among them.
Gosh, Ruth, that's a beautiful question. And I thank you for that. I think it's aspirational and you know, it's, I think, a really important question to ask. And I wish I could answer that. I know from philosophical, you know, Jews, I think I have to say this, that we have to totally reform the human being, change the human being, change the way we think, the way we operate. If we're ever going to get that, and then we have to change the international framework. You know, it just isn't working today. We have to change the world order. And that means a huge, huge change in consciousness. It almost means like saying, okay, all these material things and don't matter. And what really matters is, you know, the cosmic, you know, that we want to, you know, we're all are focused on God and how we can really fix this world and really be God's, you know, partners to really fix this world. So it means it would be a huge change in consciousness and a huge change in the way the world functions today. Now, there are glimmers of hope. I see real glimmers of hope. I see, you know, the Geneva Convention. I see, you know, all the legislation, the court, the World Court, and I think these are relatively recent phenomena. So there is hope, but unfortunately, I think we're a long way away from that.
Yes, I think you're right, but there is hope, and in
there
fact,
is hope. I think I would stress that, you know, for me to say there will never be world peace is wrong.
Right.
I can never say that, but I can say, in my opinion, given the situation today, I'm very, very pessimistic. But it'll
take a while.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
There are little things I can do.
Yeah, we can all do some things.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
Yeah.
Very much appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
And now I would like to introduce Bettina Gray. Bettina has woven several different careers into a rich life. She is co-founder of the North American Interfaith Network, serving on its board since 1986 and as its chair between 2008 and 2012. She has keynoted and lectured on world religions and human rights in various settings, including Mills College, University of California, Graduate Theological Union, and she's been a consultant to the World Council of Churches regarding interfaith relations and for the John Paul Center for Interreligious Dialogue in Rome. As a television producer and host, she created the Parliament of Souls, 27 half-hour interview series with religious leaders and teachers, which came with a companion book and was broadcast on PBS internationally in 140 countries. As a musician and a composer, she has written and arranged for vocal, choral, instrumental, and electronic media, and serves as a composer in residence with Slavyanka, Russian chorus in San Francisco, which is comprised of both Russian and Ukrainian singers. So that must be quite an experience, Bettina. So welcome to you, Bettina, and we look forward to your sharing.
Thank you for having me. You got me? You're reading
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Hold on a minute. I want to disappear the chat. There. I need to get my screen straight. I actually trained in music, not religions, but I've had a lifelong curiosity. And there was many of you may have had these early coming of age moments. Mine in the middle of Kansas, where I was raised in farming community. And I had begun to study a bit of history. My mother loved history, and it was present in our house in discussions. I realized there had been various renaissance, large-scale changes, scientific revolution, political and social, artistic. And my young mind said, you know, as I was looking, this was in the early 60s. I was looking at the Vietnam War. I was looking at still fear of nuclear threat. I was looking at some large picture issues. And it became very clear to me that humanity had to grow up, which is just what we heard from the rabbi. But that became my motto, is that we needed a spiritual revolution or renaissance. We needed to mature spiritually if we were going to get anywhere. And so though I continued my studies in music, I began a lifelong query into the practical side of religion, spiritual teaching, and how, if we do, how we might grow up. And I was dedicated to giving that any energy I could. And so with that, I'm going to start, bear with me on the technicals, to share my screen on the PowerPoint about. We'll get there. Now, let's be sure we're on the beginning slide. And there we are. Everyone seeing it?
Yes.
Good. So I'd like to change the title that you gave me.
Sure.
Presumptuously, which is Peace is Possible.
Yes. Yes.
Instead of How is Peace Possible?
Good. I like it.
Now, everyone else can discuss. This does not mean that I am by any measure an idealist or the current war in Ukraine is disgusting. It is deeply troublesome. And yet, in a larger perspective, if we can zoom back out, we've had wars even in our lifetimes. The things that happened in Syria, the things that have happened in Africa and Rwanda, we've seen bloodshed and murder and mayhem. However, through all of that, I do believe that at least at the beginning, if the only stance you can take is personal peace is possible. And I don't mean without looking realistically at the world. I just mean the effort to create as much peace with as many people in your place and time. Again, that follows on what our rabbi had to say. The golden rule, the individual actions, the greetings on your way every day. And I think we all do actually right now experience peace. We experience peace when we go to the pharmacy and ask for a prescription, and it's actually true to prescription.
Bettina, did you want to hit the play button on your piece? Because we're only seeing your first screen still.
Right. Those are just reminders for me.
Thank you.
I think the questions of political and social peace are long as the history of humanity. And it's a long struggle, but I personally up front will say I believe it's a progressive growth, one that we probably won't see in our lifetimes. But if you expand over the entire lineage of philosophy and religion, peace is becoming an ideal. The fact that we are appalled at what's going on in Ukraine right now, and fairly universally so, is a measure of the fact that the ideal of peace exists in minds far more than our own. And the last, which our previous speaker touched on, is your piece of peace, which I'm going to save to the end because it'll take us to a webpage where the North American Interfaith Network has addressed some of how we begin, how we go on with day to day. What is our piece of peace? In the early 2000s, I was participating in the Women's Leadership Institute in Mills College. And the topic for that year for everyone was global security. And I took the segment to study for actually 2 years. I was with this program, religions and global security. And this was part of my thesis, was reviewing a period of time in roughly 500 BCE to 100 CE, which is labeled by some historians and scholars the Axial Age. And it was quite remarkable in human history. There's still some debate about this, but I find it a very remarkable time. During that 600 time period, in separate cultures, perhaps with some cross-fertilization, we don't know, but there arose in China spiritual teachers, in Greece spiritual and philosophical teachers. Persia was Zarathustra. In Palestine, we had the long tradition of Judaism and also then the emergence of Jesus. In India, Buddhism, Hinduism. Now, these were long lineages, but that particular time was a remarkable period. And how I would define that remarkable period is cultures and groups, tribes and individual families were transforming the definition of other, which is again, feeding on what we just heard. That is, others stopped being just our laws for our people. Others started being more universally applicable spiritual teachings. The other was humanity, eventually, not just our particular group. And so this was adapting the basic rules of social interactions. It became not only a guide for personal conduct, but an insight into a glimmer of, for humanity, universal values. My thesis at Mills was, I believe we're entering a new axial age. I'm not talking about a decade or even maybe our lifetime. That period in reference to history was 600 years. However, I believe the idea of global awareness, the advent of international travel, the reality of moral outrage at violence or injustice, which is more and more universal. There are more and more agreed, in fact, the instituting of major international organizations of law and justice, to me, is an example of an emerging axial age. In the study for Mills, I was doing this more about the social political, which is the statecraft and my concern about statecraft. And its opposite, which is our problem for today, the rise of religious nationalism, confusion over separation of religion and state, or religious patriotism. Those are what we have to deal with. That's our working order, but I don't think it denies that we are emerging into a larger awareness for humanity. International law is the obvious follow-up. And what is the relation of our religious values, justice, and compassion within the evolution of international law? Our religions can contribute to that, and they do. Can an examination of our shared values give rise to more commonly accepted international laws? These are being challenged today, right now, in the concept of NATO, in the concept of nation state over well-being and democracy of an independent country. And then, of course, we are challenged by religiously sanctioned violence. The idea that any of our traditions and scriptures would sanction. And yes, self-defense, obviously. But there's a discussion going back to Mahavira, the Jain teacher. I'm going to tilt my screen up so you see, if you see the thumbnail of me, this is not Buddha. This is a photo of Mahavira, one of the earliest Jain.
We're not seeing what you're pointing to, Bettina, because your PowerPoint isn't in play mode. So we're still on the first slide.
Okay, well, you couldn't be on the first slide. It should say the new Axial Age. You don't see that?
No.
No, we see the first slide. So you need to put it into play for us to see the other slides.
Well, I am very sorry. I will attempt to do that again. You should see that.
Yes, yes.
I change screens. That's the photo image for Axial Age. Do you see it change?
Yes.
Okay, let's go back. That's the first. This is the description of the Axial Age, an image just to help you locate it in the world. Oh. Greece, Persia, Palestine, India, China. Teachers that arose in a 600-year period and began, I believe, the point at which the concept of universality of the other, and the beginning of, I'm not that good a historian, but the beginning of the golden rule idea in several cultures, which is do unto others. And who is that other? Well, the other stops just being my family and my group and my nation. It starts being a universal principle. Are we in the next Axial Age? We've got a lot of problems in front of us. You see this, statecraft, international law, religiously sanctioned violence. You got that screen?
Yes, yes. Okay. We got it.
Good. So the next one is one of our associates in the North American Interfaith Network in Toronto, Canada, has created a very interesting poster that's been widely spread about the Golden Rule as it is found in, I believe there's 12 cultures there. And it is stated, I'm going to take a risk here. This should take us, this is a web page which you can download free, this poster. And the Golden Rule as it is stated in, did you go there? You didn't see it. Did it embed in here? It doesn't matter. I can give you the link for this Golden Rule poster, anyone who would like to have
Great.
it.
Yeah, put that in the chat maybe.
Right. So what we have as humanity in a global picture is a spiritual legacy of religious wisdom. And if one particular one doesn't suit, there are 12 others of the versions of the Golden Rule. And sometimes there's nuance, but it still comes down to how do you deal with the other? Most of these can be summarized as what we know as the Golden Rule. And we can find those teachings and highlight peace, Our task is redefining the other. And in that, broken down in that, is the meaning of justice. How far does it apply? To whom does law and justice apply? My answer is everyone. Peace is possible, but not yet universal. The desire for peace equals the understanding of our global connectedness. The desire for peace is the evidence, the fact that we desire it. It is the canvas on which is painted the various stages of our growth. The dissonance we're suffering right now between that noble vision is a measure of reality. While we can take little comfort in the horrors we're seeing, we can be assured that the vast majority of international opinion is mobilized. I would argue that if we did not have this global ideal, we would not be overly concerned about what we see happening. Peace is hard work. And the real question is, how do we build a more universal peace? And that has to do with our growing understanding of the other, the family of humanity. In 2004, the World Council of Churches had a consultation among people who had been involved in conflict where religion was a topic or central to the conflict. And it was a invite-only private conversation. I was, because of my work in interfaith work, invited to come and document it. They did not want filming to be intrusive or to change the way the conversation was. But because of my background in interfaith work and because of my background in media, television, I was privileged to sit on this conversation and record some of it. And these people's conviction, their courage, the woman we first see speaking left the Bosnian War with her children, and then after time as a refugee, determinedly went back because she said, I knew that if there was no one there to create peace, who would do it? I had to. Each one of the people you see speaking have done similar parallels. I'll play you a little clip of this, and then I can give you a link to it. It's online. Oh dear. Come on. Play. There we go.
Uh-huh.
Because it's 15 minutes and I hate to do this, but I need to move it forward.
Religious identity was very manipulated in preparation of war and during war.
One of the most difficult challenges for religious leaders or even for any religious adherent is when someone from your own tradition uses sacred symbols and sacred texts in order to legitimate carnage, barbarism, and inhumanity.
Future also. In June of 2004, the World Council of Churches brought together people with experience in interfaith relations and peacemaking, seeking together to articulate how religion, in a responsible way, could become an unambiguous tool in overcoming violence.
First, my vision is that myself and the whole the world has to live nowadays on a boundary line. We have to step over boundaries every day and worldwide, personally, and the religions and the traditions and the cultures in this globalized world. I realize a lot of problems. I realize that we live in an empire of fear.
I'm a Hindu myself, and I have been with other religious persons like Christians and Muslims and so on. In my younger days, we never had this phenomenon of violence. It is only lately, in the last 20, 30 years, there is a surge, a resurgence of violence among the various religious groups.
Yeah, well, it's almost as though there's a new world religion that's developing, and it's based more on nationalism than on faith in something divine and we would call the creator. It's a religion that is used to justify the goals of the policies of nations.
I think we need perhaps not to have in French what we call certitude, to be sure that we're in the right way, but we need perhaps every time, to question and to be ready to change our vision, our perceptions, and it's very important. I think all of us can be wrong.
I think religion touches the deepest part of the human nature. It's a huge resource for our feelings and our ideas. And this is why it could be dramatically used for the good and for the bad.
Ana Paula!
And religion of violence, it expresses the bad use of religion, but it expresses also how religion is so powerful that if we will use it in the other way, it will be much hopeful and optimistic.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
I don't think religions should be the same. So each religion has its uniqueness, and people who follow it probably resonate with this uniqueness, and that's a very good thing. The thing is that needs to be developed is the mutual respect. The political discussions always deal with the present and the past. Who is to blame? Who started? Who did that? Who did this? But when we connect as human beings and we develop the deep and sincere and open conversation between us, we open the door for a different future.
So how do you think we can rebuild trust in the world where the violence has came up and we have lots of violence now? So what can we do about it?
I believe in the micro change, and I saw this change of myself. I saw someone coming from, he was a settler, Orthodox settler. He was raised up in this community, and he came to a conference, and it happens that we started to talk to each other, etc. He said, Muhammad, you don't know how difficult it is to be raised in an ideological community. And then you meet someone else who is very different, that all your time you were told that this person is stupid, is terrorist, he is a troublemaker, and then you find that he is not. And the changing itself, to change yourself, is very painful. It's not that easy. It's not in one session that we will hug each other and oh God, make peace prevail on earth. It's very painful because it's all your ideas, all your life is changing before your eyes.
How do you think we can make people close their eyes on the political matters? Because the issue of violence bring up the political matters in the mind of anyone.
In fact, I am for talking about these political things, but when they talk about these things informally, not in a session in which everyone has a paper and presentation and argumentations, etc., they will talk about politics, but Muhammad and Yehuda will talk about politics as Muhammad and Yehuda, not as the representative of the Arabs and the representative of Israel.
I'm sorry for the abrupt stop. There's no place to stop. It will go on. You can finish seeing the rest of it online, but the nature of these conversations are the work we have in front of us to do for peace. We can't just pray for peace. We have to live for peace. We pray with our feet. But what we can do when we get down to the personal is, first of all, not be discouraged. Be aware as much as you can when your emotions are being played for the purpose of political power. When your emotions are being played to alienate and ostracize other people, ask questions. That's why this is such a big questions forum. Great. We have to ask questions. Focus on solutions. Never mind how hard or how big, or you can't go to fight in the Ukraine to support other people, or whatever it is. There's always something, some solution in front of you, even if it's just making peace in your own family, which is maybe harder. There's a saying, to steer a bicycle, it has to be in motion. And so we all have to be in motion in order to get there, to build peace. There are so many projects. The North American Interfaith Network, excuse me, was one of mine. Your attending today is participating. As soon as you start thinking about solutions, I believe you'll find many. What got me started in interfaith work is a card that I carry. The reason I took a picture of it, it's all crumpled up. It's been in my wallet for decades. Someone gave it to me. It was an Episcopal priest here. And this was in 1975. And it had a profound effect on my thoughts. It says, the surest liberation from idolatrous religion is to have to meet God in people who are very different from ourselves. And then on the back, flip side, it defined idolatrous as worshiping, trusting wholly in what is not God, less than God. You could substitute the words ingrown, private, racist, nationalist. The surest liberation from nationalist religion is to have to meet God in people who are very different from ourselves. And the second subset definition, God, you could use ultimate reality, first source and center, to fill our most basic needs, to have what we cannot do without, to be able to live fully and know the most basic truths, to find true happiness and get fundamental strength. Following on that, I had the privilege of a lifetime. I was able to work to create a PBS broadcast series called A Parliament of Souls. And it's available on YouTube. I can share that link as well. This is a playlist with some of the speakers, and I highlighted this particular one. I believe his widow, Barbara Gahn, was going to sign into this chat. I don't know if she's here today. Barbara Gahn Mueller. She herself is a peace dynamo. She has her own peace podcast, quite worth listening to. Robert Mueller, when I say be not discouraged, and there's always something to do, told this story in the interview. This is Robert Mueller. He was the son of a hat maker. He was in a border between France and Germany. They were constantly played back and forth. He became a refugee in World War II and eventually part of the French resistance. And he was multiply arrested by the Nazis. And he told a story, because he was a perpetual optimist, that when he was captured and put in prison in a standing room only jail, packed body to body, he said to himself, now what? What can I do? He found a stub of pencil in his pocket and started writing a love poem on the wall. Peacemaking requires a certain degree of stubbornness and the ability to keep hope. This Parliament of Souls series is a treasure of, it isn't, each show is just a 5-minute clip of an interview, copyright issues and everything. Laura, who is here today, helped me clip segments out of each of these shows to talk about a global ethic, the nature of the divine, the Dalai Lama talking on selfless service, Pierre Vilayat Inayat Khan on suffering. It's a very interesting story. His show as well. Aziza Al-Hibri on Islam and women. I suggest if you want to be encouraged to carry on with peace, take a look at some of these wonderful people. So yes, peace is possible. Political peace, we have a long ways to go. We all know how long we have to go, but at least we hold the vision of a place to go. Personal peace we can work on. And in closing, I'll show you the organization I work with, a remarkable man. I invited him to come today too, Brian Farr, who's a Rotary International leader and one of our former chairs, helped create this, Your Piece of Peace. And again, reference to puzzle parts. We seem to be having repeats going on. How can each of us make sure our own individual piece is the best possible fit? And then there are links to follow, a call to civility. How do we carry on? There's papers and information and links under each one of these pieces of puzzle.
So Bettina, we don't see that. I don't see a puzzle.
You don't.
I see piece is possible, and then the 3 parts of the piece underneath.
Let me stop and change the way I'm showing the screen. The link was supposed to go to this.
There, yeah, that's it. You got it.
Okay, now you can.
Maybe you can copy those and put them in the chat room for us, because if it's on a share, we're not able to see it.
Yeah, I'm scrolling down the page. You see the scroll?
Yes.
So for instance, here's a link with sub content. And I will post each of links to these, to the video and to the to this website. You might have to remind me. So anyway, hopefully I'm apparently not as skilled at keeping the PowerPoint together as I thought. I hope you got most of it. And I guess that's my answer. Peace is possible, but it is a much bigger project than today, tomorrow, this week, this decade, even this lifetime.
Thank you so much, Bettina. And what I got from it is that we can begin right now. The story of the man who was incarcerated, taking out a little pencil nub and writing a love poem on the wall is very, very poignant. So thank you so much. You've taken us through a lot of history and a lot of thinking, and I could probably go through, your whole talk again and still.
I was trying to point. Now, can you see the photo or the image that's above my head?
Right, barely, yeah, but we can sort of see it.
That's Mahavira.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
Mahavira was the founder. Well, there were others, leaders, but the conventional discussion is that he was the founder of Jainism. One of the oldest traditions, and the thrust of their belief system is nonviolence. It's stated in, I'm not sure what language, as ahimsa, which is a positive statement. It's translated into English as a negative statement, nonviolence. But what they teach is do no harm. And we have a legacy, whether we know it or not, through Gandhi and through Martin Luther King, who both studied with the Jains and Jain teaching. It's a very detailed teaching about nonviolence, and we go back that far. And Mahavira was, if I am correct, also in that same new axial time as a teacher.
Thank you. It was very interesting to learn about the axial time. There was a great deal of spiritual energy happening during that time, it appears. So we've got a few minutes now to have any questions of Bettina or to make comments of our own. Please raise your hand or just jump in. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, Harvey Weinstein. You're muted. Unmute.
Harvey.
There we go.
One of the issues that comes through in the film is the manipulation by ambitious politicians of religion for the purposes of violence and for meeting their own ends. One of the things that's not discussed, however, is the collusion of religious leaders with these politicians. And you can see that currently with the Russian Orthodox Church in Moscow, yes, supporting the war and the invasion of Ukraine. And I wonder if you have any comments about that, about working with religious leaders, about confronting religious leaders when they are in the process of fomenting violence.
It's a very difficult, and as in the video, you saw the fellow from South Africa talk, he was Muslim, talking how it grieved him when his faith was being appropriated in that way. I think it grieves a lot of people.
You should understand that I worked in Bosnia, South Africa, Rwanda, Indonesia, Sri Lanka. Right. I've seen it over and over and over.
You've seen that appropriation. Spirit, I believe, has a chance to transform people individually. And I think that is so powerful that there are whole groups of people who want to claim and control it in order. They see the power and they hope to control it. I don't believe fundamentally, because the dream of peace stays alive from generation to generation. But yes, politicians can and do corrupt and misuse. And I think that's partly because people, I'm sorry, it's hard. You know, it's a hard thing to answer. In my opinion, quite frankly, fear is the driver. Fear on an individual basis, when they have just a little theology, people follow religion in a very slavish way because they're afraid to be wrong, and they are very easily told something is religion when it actually has little to do with the religion. They can be led astray, and I'll be frank. I mean, I'm saying these words in my own judgmental way. I think there's a deeper theology. People can examine for themselves the reality of truth. They do not have to be pawns in the hands of politicians, but that takes courage. And socially, we can encourage each other to be brave in our discovery of truth.
Thank you. I appreciated you said spirit can transform people. Yes. The way that spirit, in my understanding, my experience works is through my personal relationship with the divine. We can have a relationship through institutions, through books, through, you know, all methods of chanting and dancing. We can express ourselves that way. But I believe that when we desire a personal communication, connection with the divine, then the spirit can work through us.
That's wonderful, Sarah, but what do you do for group and collective social behavior? The whole meaning of law is that we collectively agree on justice. Yes. And I'm not among, here, you invited me, I'm opinionated.
Hey, that's why you're invited.
I'm not among the folks who would say I'm spiritual but not religious. I am not too supportive of the nones generation, meaning none of the above, I'm just spiritual, because we still have large social problems to solve. And the institutions and traditions of religion are, some of them in different times, deeply flawed. It's, to me, obvious in the Russian Orthodox Church right now. However, I know personally people who are Russian Orthodox. I sing with them every week. It deeply motivates them, their faith. It calls on them to do some amazing things because it's a deep faith connection. They congregate together and support each other in that faith. And that has a constructive function in the world. So we're back to the first question is, how do you deal with the people at the higher level of politics who see power there and manipulate it? Yeah. Well, I guess we have to grow up and become manipulation resistant by owning truth and examining it as a quest in our own lives and not separating ourselves out from others. I am involved in the North American Interfaith Network rather than go off and meditate in a cave because I really support the folks who practice religion to go deep and practice.
Yeah, thank you.
It's kind of like losing weight. You can talk about it, or it's never going to take the weight off, is it?
Yeah.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
So is there anybody else that doesn't matter if we go over a few minutes, if there's other comments or
you
questions?
have a couple of hands up.
I see. Adrian Roth. Unmute. Adrian, can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry.
There we go.
I couldn't hear you at first. Yeah, well, I too would like to move away from the religious spiritual of good and evil and behavior, but more of the personal examination, internal examination and decision making. And probably a lot of this depends on the field or the path that we choose that seems important to us, but I'm a psychologist, so I look at things like the research, the old Sharif research where they talk about superordinate goals. And so if there is something, you can have competing forces about something, but if there is a goal that is more important to both groups, that they're in agreement about resolving, and often that comes with war. You know, Democrats and Republicans can come together about Ukraine, for example. So those then there's the personal. So one is sort of a process, movement towards peace, and then there's also the sort of personal ideation, such as, well, that person is like me, so I tend to agree with them more. You know, I tend to have an automatic connection without even much examination. So you tend to identify with people, and you know, who are the Democrats going to be voting for? Well, I'll tend to vote for their paper rather than really necessarily examining it myself, or a religion, identifying with religion and saying, well, I have so much in common with them, we're more likely to think the same and come to a decision like that. I'm the same, I've had the same racial experiences as so and so as that group, so I have more of a affinity to that to making that decision. But when it comes to looking at peace, I think it needs to go beyond all those individual identifications and to a maybe in a sense a superordinate goal. So then you look at Ukraine, for example, and you say, well, look at all the people that subordinate goal has brought together, all the countries that have come into the quest for peace and against Russia. But what about Putin and Russia? How do we develop a superordinate goal with someone with whom we don't seem to have a similar goal? And it's finding something beyond that. If it is peace, at what cost is peace? I mean, for the Ukrainians to have peace, it will be very costly for them. So the subordinate goal isn't the same. And that's where I think the tough work is.
The tough work is actually redefining the other. That's what, in summary, the whole outline you were just giving is how big do we include as the other, that for whom justice applies to everyone. And I'm not against international law that decides an outlier individual is not healthy for the whole and applies justice. But it's a collective group decision. We do it together. And in that together, as a larger definition, we grow in our understanding of peace. We don't outcast entire groups of people because they're different from us, but we have the right to control individual behaviors with a vision that we share together that you talked about.
So do you think that vision is developing now with the situation in Ukraine, in many, many countries of the world? Do you think that there's a vision developing?
Well, if we're using, because all are quite focused, and I must say I'm grieved every day with it, and Will Garvey has his hand up, so let's...
Oh, I'm sorry, Will.
But let me say, we've heard of tens of thousands of people being killed. And to me, there's no excuse, no reason for it's appalling. However, the refugees have left on a moment's notice or in the millions. And Poland, for instance, I have Polish friends who tell me some of the story. And beyond that, Europe is hosting on a moment's notice 2, 3, how many million people? Taking them in, feeding them, finding, I mean, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And we are redirected and misdirected. Of course, we're misdirected by the violence, but we need to remember the rest too.
Yes, that's important to emphasize that, because that's what is creating a vision of hope. So Will, you had your hand up? No, you didn't? Oh, okay.
It says on the screen that maybe it didn't ever get taken down.
Oh, okay. So we're, very interested if anybody else has anything to say or question. Otherwise,
let me
please, Bettina. Yeah.
I wanted to try to find, and I'm afraid I'm just going to have to do this in a slow way, but I don't have the link yet. Okay. And then playlists from different interviews. And
You
so,
spent 40 years with the UN, and yet you remain a hopeful man.
Well, I would say that it is the United Nations that has made me hopeful. Because when I entered the UN in 1948, I just came out of the Second World War. I saw incredible horrors. I was imprisoned by the Gestapo at the age of 17. I was in the French underground later on.
It's irresistible. I want to hear him. Even though I know what it says, he was such an inspiring human being, as were many of the others. So this is, hopefully I can paste that link in, and that's a playlist of a bunch.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Bettina, and thank you, Rabbi Perelmuter. It was just a very rich session, and I see that if we had a lot more time, we could go forth into deeper and broader realms, and we will. Stay tuned for next month. On the third Monday, we have a Presbyterian, Reverend Mark Burnham, speaking, and we have a Baha'i, Shaheen Gudusi, speaking. So same, just excellent presentations. Really appreciate the time and effort, Rabbi and Bettina, that you have put in to give us something to think about. Channing, you have hand up, I see it.
Yay. So, Bettina, I just want to say thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And also, rabbis, thank you so much, because the collaboration, even though you haven't collaborated, the coming together of your points of view were so helpful. And I think it's always so helpful to go back into time, to go back into history, and then to think about how we're going to get from here to the future. And I think, Bettina, you've covered a lot of that. And it's so complex. And I think the thing that I keep looking for is, in the midst of all this chaos and in the midst of all this violence, I also see the world coming together very fragilely, very fragilely. And so that's where I put my hope. And that's what I'm working on. And I think each one of us needs to think about what our own piece of peace is. And my piece is creating openings. No, see, it's planting seeds for creating opening hearts. And I'm doing that in very specific ways, but that's my piece of peace.
Thank you very much, Channing. I really appreciate your words. And being a student also of many other religions, I think when it all comes down to it, there's a core oneness that we all share. And I think it all comes down to, there's a key line in Jewish prayer. And it was done not 600 years ago, it was done before the Jains came around. It was probably done, I don't know. I guess religions argues who's really got the thing here. So I'm not even going to go there. But what resonates is, we've got the real, we started it all out. But if we all take this spirit, and I think it's in a Jewish prayer, and I think it's in probably in a lot of prayers of other faiths. And we say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And that means, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. So if God truly is one, okay, all right, his name shall be one. God, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. So if God is one, how in the world can there be another? We're all, if God is truly one, God doesn't love the Jews more than the Jains or the Christians or the Buddhists or all these kind of people. God is one. God loves everyone, and everyone is equally valid. So there's this oneness, and I think Bettina, you really targeted that beautifully.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meir. Thank you. Well, folks, I think, yeah, go ahead.
I want to just say one more thing, because next month we're having a Baha'i speaker.
Yes.
And, you know, Baha'is have this amazing plan for the future. And they have created a plan for social order within the Baha'i community. And it's based on consultation. So people come together into the circle. They will talk openly and freely so that everybody's opinion is valued and appreciated. But at the end of the day, when they make a vote and they take a vote, everybody votes, and whatever they vote on, everybody has to get behind it. And so I think this is a way of looking at how we get people together with all these different backgrounds. There's so many different elements to it. There's a lot of educational elements to it. But when we bring people together, we've got to have some sense of order. And that's what I really like about this framework that the Baha'is have created. It's not perfect, but, and the second thing is that in the Baha'i writings, it says that if one person or one country assaults another country, that all the nations of the world should stand up collectively in unified way against that one country. So I think that there is something thinking about how to begin to go towards a global order and how to transform both from the individual level as well as the global level. And somehow we've got to bring those two together, you know? So, you know, my piece is planting seeds for opening hearts. That's my commitment in my work as a spiritual director. And I think each person can think about what you want to have as your piece to work on this year. I think that's a good action plan.
Yes, totally. Thank you.
I have one thing I'd like to just share
Sure.
connected to that, and that it's, you know, one of the things that gets in the way of this international order, and one of the things that they wrote things around was nuclear weapons, right? And nuclear weapons themselves, and even giving the veto to the countries that have nuclear weapons in their work on the Security Council of the UN. What we're seeing from Russia now is a purposeful ending to this international order, because they're using their nuclear weapons to try to keep people from even getting into this conflict. And it's among the last things undone with the creation of the UN. And maybe we can create something that takes away this power, because especially in the way that it's being abused in Russia. But our own country has been abusing this power for some time. Some of us in the faith community have been more vocal about this, but there is a great organization within the United Religions Initiative, Voices Against Nuclear Weapons or Nuclear Future, and Bishop Swing put together this Nakedness and Nukes document recently that I just put in the chat room that I invite you to read. We used it as a point of dialogue at our last elected council meeting. And this is one of the big things that needs to be discussed.
Actually, one of the members of that organization was here today. She was quiet and had to leave early, but Barbara Newsom is on that group.
Oh. I thought I recognized.
And our own Carolyn McKenzie, former chair of our Interfaith Councils, continues to be on the group. And it's an amazing group, and it's one that we should be not only listening to, but participating in.
Is that an international group?
Yeah, it's a part of the United Religions Initiative, so it's automatically an international and interfaith group.
Right, good. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, and the energy and the wisdom, Bettina and Rabbi. And tune in next time. And I don't quite understand, Reverend Albert, you said something about a virtual lunch afterwards?
Yeah, whenever I join a Zoom group, I bring food.
Oh. Okay, well, we can all have imagination, I guess.
If you can make me a co-host, I'd share
Just
it with
did.
everyone.
Just
Okay.
did if you want.
All right. There you go. So this is the much of the food from everything from sent to Zoom. I don't know what's going on. Everything from pizza to tasty cake to
You are inviting us.
and if you print the screen for yourself, you can have that for dinner and perhaps even a meal tomorrow. Guaranteed
no calories.
There are no calories. It is kosher and halal. It's just an easy food to take down.
Thank you, Reverend, for a good laugh.
It's always my pleasure.
It's good. Okay, checking out, you guys. See you in a month. Thanks again, Will. Bye-bye.
Bye all.
It will get posted soon on our YouTube channel. So if anyone missed a day, just send them to the YouTube channel for Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County, spelled out. Thank you.